A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. So, I actually did something a bit refined last night. I stepped out of the usual routine and caught a performance at the Symphony Hall. Real highbrow stuff, Herman. Violins, brass, the whole 9 yards.
You went to the symphony? That is a sudden pivot from your usual evening of staring at the ceiling and contemplating the existential dread of being a sloth. Who did you go with? Surely you didn't sit through 3 hours of Mahler alone.
It wasn't Mahler, for your information. And I wasn't alone. I went with Hilbert Flumingtop. We had a lovely time discussing the acoustics of the hall and the price of the intermission gin.
Hilbert, our producer? Corn, you are a terrible liar. You have a documented clinical phobia of anteaters. The last time Hilbert tried to hand you a physical copy of the show notes, you climbed the nearest bookshelf and stayed there for 4 hours. You expect me to believe you sat shoulder to shoulder with a long-nosed insectivore in a cramped concert hall for an entire evening?
Look, I'm working on my triggers, all right? It was exposure therapy. Very brave of me. But honestly, the music was almost secondary to the bizarre spectacle happening right in the middle of the stage. There was this guy, Herman. Just one guy, standing on a little wooden box, facing away from the audience. He had a stick. A tiny, thin white stick. And he was just waving it.
You mean the conductor?
Is that what they call it? I have a theory, Herman. I think he's a legacy hire. You know, like a guy who's been with the company for 40 years, knows where all the bodies are buried, but he's lost his touch. He probably used to be a killer cellist or something, but his hands gave out, and the union wouldn't let them fire him. So they gave him a stick and told him to stand where everyone can see him so he feels important.
A legacy hire? Corn, that is perhaps the most reductive, scientifically inaccurate, and frankly hilarious take on one of the most complex leadership roles in human history. By the way, before I dismantle that theory piece by piece, I should mention that today's episode is powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash. It's writing our script today, though I doubt even an AI could have predicted your failed musician theory.
I'm just saying, the musicians weren't even looking at him. They had their heads buried in their sheet music. He was back there doing interpretive dance, sweating through a tuxedo. And meanwhile, the violins were doing just fine on their own. It felt like a pity job. Here you go, Barnaby. Wave this stick around while the real pros do the work.
It is fascinating that you see it that way, because the conductor is actually the only person on that stage who is playing the entire orchestra as a single instrument. You're right that it's a silent role in terms of acoustic output, but in terms of information density, that guy with a stick is the CPU of the entire operation.
A CPU? He looked more like a glorified metronome that forgot how to keep a steady beat. He was flailing. Sometimes he'd stop moving one arm entirely and just point aggressively at the flutes like they'd insulted his mother. If I want a metronome, I can buy one for $10. I don't need to pay $85 for a ticket to watch a man have a synchronized breakdown.
See, that's the common misconception. If a conductor were just a metronome, the orchestra would sound like a MIDI file, mechanical, lifeless, and perfectly square. The reason the conductor exists, and the reason the role became essential in the 19th century, is because orchestras grew too large for the musicians to coordinate themselves through mere proximity.
How did they do it before? Did they just wing it?
In the Baroque era, say the 1700s, ensembles were small, maybe 15 or 20 people. They were usually led by the first chair violinist, the concertmaster, who would signal starts and stops with a nod of the head or a flourish of the bow. Or sometimes a keyboard player at the harpsichord would keep the pulse. But then came the 19th century, Beethoven, Berlioz, Wagner. They started writing music that required 80, 100, 120 players. At that scale, the speed of sound actually becomes a problem.
The speed of sound? Come on, they're all on the same stage.
If you're a percussionist at the very back of a large stage and you wait to play until you hear the violins at the front, you're already late. Sound travels at about 343 meters per second. Across a large stage, that delay is enough to turn a crisp chord into a muddy mess. The musicians cannot rely on their ears to stay in sync. They have to rely on a shared visual reference point that exists outside the acoustic delay. That is the conductor.
Okay, so he's a traffic cop. I still don't see why that requires a specialized artist. Just put a big digital clock up there that flashes red on the beat. Save some money on the tuxedo budget.
It's so much more than traffic control, Corn. It's about interpretation. Think about a script, since we're talking about scripts today. You can give the same lines to two different actors, and you'll get two completely different performances. Music is the same. A score tells you the notes and the general tempo, but it doesn't tell you the soul of the piece. The conductor decides how long a pause should be, how aggressive a crescendo should feel, and what the overall narrative arc of the performance is.
I don't know, Herman. It sounds like you're falling for the maestro myth. I bet if that guy had tripped and fallen off his little box, the orchestra would have finished the song just fine. It's a classic case of middle management taking credit for the labor of the frontline workers. I see through the suit.
Actually, there have been experiments on this. Researchers have used infrared motion tracking on orchestral players, and when the conductor intentionally provides ambiguous or conflicting signals, the rhythmic cohesion of the group falls apart almost instantly. The stick, or the baton, isn't just a piece of wood. It's an amplifier for the hand. It makes the tip of the gesture visible to a musician sitting 40 feet away in the shadows of the brass section. There is a whole geometry to it. Downbeat is the most important. That's the one of the measure. Then there's a specific path for the second, third, and fourth beats.
So it is a code.
It's a high bandwidth nonverbal communication system. While the right hand usually handles the timekeeping and the basic pulse, the left hand is doing the expressive work. It's signaling for more volume, or telling the oboes to play more sweetly, or cueing a specific entrance. Imagine trying to manage 80 people simultaneously, giving each of them individual instructions in real time without saying a single word. That's what's happening up there.
I'm telling you, it's an Iranian psyop.
A what? Corn, what on earth does the Iranian government have to do with the history of Western classical conducting?
It's the perfect cover. You create this role that looks vital but produces nothing. You convince the Western intelligentsia that they need a leader who doesn't actually make a sound. It's training for a society that follows directions without questioning the source. I won't elaborate further, mostly because I don't want the listeners to be tracked, but the connections are there if you look at the frequency of the baton movements.
You are using a geopolitical conspiracy theory to avoid admitting that you don't understand music theory. That is a new low, even for you. Can we please get back to the actual mechanics? You mentioned the musicians weren't looking at him. That's another misconception. They aren't staring at him, but they are keeping him in their peripheral vision. It's like driving a car. You're looking at the road, but you're aware of the dashboard and the cars around you. The conductor is the horizon line they use to stay level.
Fine. Let's say he's interpreting. Who decided his interpretation is the right one? If I'm the guy playing the trumpet, and I think the song should be played fast and loud because I want to get to the bar after the show, why do I have to listen to the guy with the stick who wants it slow and wistful?
Because if 80 people all have their own interpretation, you don't have a symphony, you have a riot. The conductor is the unified vision. Think about Herbert von Karajan in the 1960s. He was the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic, and he was legendary for his absolute, almost dictatorial control. He wanted a specific, lush, polished sound. He would rehearse sections for hours just to get the string vibrato to match perfectly. When you listen to a Karajan recording, you aren't just hearing Beethoven, you're hearing Karajan's Beethoven. He's the architect. The musicians are the builders. You wouldn't tell a builder to just wing it on the floor plan because they felt like putting the kitchen in the backyard.
Building a house has a practical purpose. This just seems like a way to make one person the star of a group effort. It's very corporate. It's the CEO getting the bonus while the engineers do the coding. Honestly, Herman, your defense of this is making me even more suspicious of who you spend your time with. Are you secretly a conductor? Do you have a baton hidden in your drawer?
I wish, but no, I just appreciate the sheer technical difficulty of the job. Most of a conductor's work actually happens before the audience even arrives. It's in the rehearsals. That's where they take the raw material of the orchestra and shape it. They might spend 20 minutes on 4 bars of music talking about the color of the sound or the precise way a note should end. By the time you see them on stage, the programming is mostly done. The performance is about execution and real-time adjustments.
So he's a debugger?
Well, no, I can't say exactly. I promised myself I wouldn't use that word. But yes, the conductor is debugging the performance in real time. If the woodwinds are starting to drag, he pushes the tempo. If the brass is overpowering the strings, he gestures for them to pull back. He's the feedback loop.
I still think Hilbert could do it. He's got that long nose, he wouldn't even need a stick. He could just point with his snout. Though, obviously, I wouldn't be able to watch because of the whole situation.
The situation being your imaginary phobia that you used as a cover for your date? Corn, just admit you went with someone else. Was it that girl from the library, the one who likes the weird prompts?
I will neither confirm nor deny the presence of a library associate. I will only say that the conductor's hair was very distracting. It had a life of its own. Every time the music got loud, his hair would fly around like he was in a wind tunnel. Is that part of the training? Conducting 101, how to use your follicles to signal a fortissimo.
Actually, the physical charisma of a conductor is a huge factor in the business side of music. Look at someone like Gustavo Dudamel. When he took over the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the Dudamel effect was a real thing. Audience engagement went through the roof. Ticket sales jumped by something like 40%. Why? Because people like a focal point. They like to see the music embodied in a human being. It makes the abstract nature of a symphony more accessible. You're watching the music happen through his body.
So it's theater. It's a performance of a performance. He's the hype man for the violinists. Flava Flav for the tuxedo crowd.
That's a bit crude, but not entirely wrong. He is the bridge between the musicians and the audience. When he looks exhausted and triumphant at the end of a movement, the audience feels that exhaustion and triumph too. But beneath the theater is a layer of intense, high-level structural logic. He has to know every single part of that score. He has to know what the second bassoon is doing at measure 342, and he has to be ready to catch them if they miss their cue.
I've seen you do that with this podcast. You're always catching me when I miss my cues. Are you my conductor, Herman? Am I just a second bassoon in the Symphony of Poppleberry?
You're more like a rogue kazoo player who wandered onto the stage and started shouting about Iranian psyops, Corm. But I keep the beat going.
Well, the kazoo player noticed that the audience was very intense about the whole thing. There was this lady next to me. Well, not next to me, next to Hilbert, who glared at me because I whispered that the conductor looked like he was trying to swat a very fast fly. The social dynamics of these concerts are almost as weird as the guy on the box. It's like a secret society where the stick waver is the grand wizard.
It can feel that way because we've lost a lot of the musical literacy that used to be common. 100 years ago, more people played instruments at home. They understood the difficulties of coordination. Today, we're used to perfectly produced, quantized digital music. We forget that getting 80 humans to do the same thing at the exact same millisecond is a miracle of engineering. It's a distributed system with a central coordinator.
See, now you're talking my language. Distributed systems. But in a real distributed system, you want to avoid a single point of failure. If the conductor has a heart attack, the system should fail over to a backup. Does the concertmaster just step up? Is there a standby conductor waiting in the wings with an emergency baton?
Usually, the concertmaster would take over the lead, yes, but the interpretation would likely shift back to a more conservative, safe version of the piece. You wouldn't get the daring artistic choices that a great conductor brings. It's the difference between a self-driving car that stays in the lane and a Formula One driver who knows exactly how much to clip a corner to shave off 1/10 of a second.
I'm still stuck on the baton. You said it encodes tempo, dynamics, and phrasing. How do you get phrasing out of a stick? It's a piece of wood. It doesn't have phrasing.
It's in the weight and the shape of the movement. If the conductor wants a sharp, staccato sound, the movements are small, jerky, and precise. If they want a flowing, legato sound, the baton moves in smooth, circular arcs. The musicians mirror the velocity of the baton in their own playing. It's almost like a visual metaphor for the sound they should produce. If you watch closely, you can actually see the music before you hear it. The conductor is always a fraction of a second ahead of the sound. He has to be to lead them.
That sounds like a lag issue. If he's ahead of the sound, and the sound has a delay because of the hall, isn't everyone just guessing?
It's a calibrated guess. It's a shared understanding. The orchestra learns the latency of their conductor. Some conductors have a very late beat where the sound actually happens a significant moment after the baton hits the bottom of the stroke. It drives some musicians crazy, but once they get the hang of it, they use that space to breathe into the note. It's all part of the feel.
The latency of the conductor. That sounds like a great name for a synth pop band. I'll add it to the list right under Iranian Psyop.
You know, for someone who spent the whole night mocking the guy, you seem to have paid a lot of attention to him. Maybe you were actually inspired? Maybe you'll trade in your sloth-like ways for a life on the podium.
Absolutely not. Too much standing. And the dry cleaning bill for those tuxedos must be astronomical. I'll stick to the audience, where I can judge people from the safety of the dark. But I will say the next time I go, definitely with Hilbert again, naturally. I might look at the stick waver a little differently. Maybe I'll try to debug his gestures.
That's all I ask. A little respect for the invisible architect. By the way, how was the intermission gin? Or did Hilbert drink it all?
It was overpriced and served in a plastic cup. A complete tragedy. But the library associate, Hilbert, seemed to enjoy it.
You literally just admitted it was the library associate.
I did no such thing. You're hallucinating. It's the Gemini 3 flash. It's putting words in my mouth.
Nice try. But since we're talking about practical takeaways, maybe we should give the listeners something they can actually use the next time they find themselves in a concert hall.
My first takeaway, don't buy the intermission gin. Bring a flask. It's more conductor-esque to have a secret source of power.
My real takeaway would be this. The next time you're at a performance, try an experiment. Spend about 30% of your time watching only the conductor. Ignore the instruments for a moment. Watch the left hand versus the right hand. See if you can predict a change in volume or a sudden stop just by looking at the tension in his shoulders or the height of the baton. Once you start to see the code, the music becomes three-dimensional.
And my second takeaway, when someone gives you a suspiciously specific alibi, like, I went to the symphony with an anteater I'm deathly afraid of, the specificity is the data point. It means they're hiding something much more interesting. Or they're just eccentric.
Or they're a sloth who went on a date and doesn't want his brother to tease him about it for the next 3 years.
That too. But honestly, Herman, the conductor thing is a great metaphor for technical leadership. You've got all these specialists, the coders, the designers, the QA people, and they all know their instrument better than the manager does. But the manager's job isn't to play the instrument, it's to make sure the product sounds like a symphony, and not a collection of soloists fighting for attention.
That is actually a very astute observation. It's the invisible work of technical leadership. We actually did an episode on that a long time ago, episode 147, for those who want to dig through the archives. It's about how the best leaders are often the ones who seem to be doing the least in terms of direct output, but whose presence is the reason the whole thing doesn't collapse.
See? I can do depth. I'm not just a pretty face with a phobia of long-nosed mammals. I'm an analyst of the human condition.
An analyst who thinks orchestral music is a foreign intelligence operation.
Look, the truth is out there, Herman. You just have to follow the baton. It's pointing somewhere, and I don't think it's just at the second violins.
On that note, I think we've reached the finale of this particular movement.
Before we go, I want to thank our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, who definitely attended the symphony with me, and definitely didn't try to eat any of the ants in the lobby.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that powered this show's generation pipeline. We couldn't do these deep dives into the Maestro myth without them.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you enjoyed our exploration of the guy with the stick, find us at myweirdprompts.com for the RSS feed and all the ways to subscribe.
We'll be back next time with more of Daniel's weird prompts, hopefully with fewer conspiracy theories.
No promises. Safe travels, everyone.
Goodbye.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird